Tech Birmingham, Navigating the New Normal, our webinar series that we started in response to all of the craziness that was going on. In a lot of ways, we are easing into what that new normal means. We kind of hit a routine with this, interestingly enough. And I mean, this a series has been very valuable for me, just personally, hopefully not too selfish, but just personally, it has been very valuable. And that was one of the things that we wanted to do, right? Make sure that we're delivering value, not just to our members, but to the entire community. And so I've appreciated the people who have taken time to share with us their expertise, whether that was around team dynamics and how to make sure that everybody can still thrive and function as a collaborative unit, as a team throughout all of this. Once we first got started, obviously kind of appreciating what this new reality meant. There was an overwhelming need for some of the fundamentals, if you will, around the tools to help us navigate around some of the things that we just needed to be aware of, right? Whether there were cybersecurity threats, or if you had to deal, unfortunately, with a force majeure clause and invoking that. And so in a very short amount of time, we've been able to cover a lot of topics. And again, I'm grateful, but also I think it affirms what we sought out to do. And so with that in mind, I want to make sure that we invite you on to be members of Tech Birmingham, right? But that is just kind of the first level. But also to let us know what you are seeing, what you are hearing, how you want to be involved, because we want to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at, and that we are providing great value in any shape or form, and that we're being good community partners as well. And so, again, make sure you or your organization are a part of this. As always, we will be sharing out this content again soon. I won't get into all of that just yet. We have some housekeeping things that we want to go over before we introduce our guests. And so with that said, I'll turn it over to Christina briefly to help us set the stage.
Perfect. Okay, so we do have the Q&A feature. So if you have questions as we're going along, Rebecca will be monitoring the Q&A. And then also the chat board, of course. Go ahead and we want this to be very interactive. And so our audience is awesome at chatting with one another. So please use the chat feature. So with that said, I'll go ahead and introduce Larry Tribble. He is our speaker, or he's going to be our presenter today. And Larry is the COO of Sigao Studios. And not only is he the COO, he's also the director of coaching practice there for Sigao Studios. He has a doctorate in strategic information systems, along with an MBA and a master's in enterprise consulting. So we see here he is a professional student. He has over 20 years of corporate IT experience managing development teams. And he has studied management through his career and coached management for more than 5 years. His focus is individual and organizational productivity. And he has developed the Attention Compass Productivity System. He's spoken and presented about his research at the Atlanta Competitive Advantage Conference, the Strategic Management Society, and the Academy of Management conferences several times. He is here today to help us help me in particular, harness my time. I'm going to be his guinea pig.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, we're doing something a little bit different. Christina has volunteered to be the guinea pig, and we're going to do a live coaching session. It's a little bit shorter than what we typically do, so we'll just have to hit the high point. The Attention Compass, as Christina mentioned, and oh, by the way, I didn't realize how boring my resume was until Christina, you made it exciting.
Whatever.
I'll have to tidy that up, y'all. So we're going to actually work through part of a coaching session. The Attention Compass is a set of practices and habits that enable people to really get in control of their own information. That involves both reference information, things you think you might want to know, your task information, your calendar, all of these things are very important. And we want to put you in a position where you're able to harness and focus your attention, because I think everybody that's attending this particular webinar is what we would call a knowledge worker. And that means that we work with our skulls as much as we work with anything else. And attention then is our asset. So whatever it is you're paying attention to is what you're making progress on. And so we work on distraction, we work on different aspects of attention management, which has a lot to do with your calendar and your task list.
Yes. So one of the things that we realized was, and I had always been not the best with time management, but I've always managed to get everything done. And so in my mind, I thought I was managing my time pretty well. What I've learned through this working from home is that time management looks different when when your whole life is in your house and with the people that are in your family. And so, and, you know, as we were talking to some of our members, I realized that I wasn't alone in this boat with struggling with managing my time, because it looks very different. So when we were brainstorming about how to work through this, you know, I gave him a list of my, you know, like a small bite of my to-do list. And then I showed him my calendar. And so we decided that we were going to walk through, and he was going to help me capture some extra time in my day to make sure that I get everything done. So again, you know, what we are going to be showing you, this is just a small bite-sized morsel of my day, you know, of what I have to accomplish in a day. There's a lot more, but we didn't want to bore all of you. So we decided to do just some bite-sized pieces.
Well, and attorney-client privilege here, right? So we're all actually going to be seeing Christina's live calendar. So
yes, it's my real calendar.
So you made a couple of interesting points, Christina, kind of in the bigger picture. One is managing your attention is something that needs to be done regardless of whether you're at your office, whether you're working from home. It transcends really whatever the momentary, for lack of a better term, crisis might be, right? I do think you bring up the interesting point. So when you're at the office, interruptions are typically from your coworkers. And so you can call that business,
yes,
right? You can pretend to yourself that that's productivity. When you're at home and the interruption is, you know, my dogs, when they see me sit here, all of a sudden they need to go out every 15 minutes and back in every 5. So they're constantly going through the door. So what we see as an interruption has changed a little bit as we've gone home, right? And we really are face to face with the fact that, you know, my coworkers are not really here. So interruptions in person are by definition not really business. Whereas if they're in the office, you know, the CEO walks in and interrupts you, it's like, well, yeah, you know, that's work. So I think we're seeing some different things, but really to make the point, yes, that we want to build habits now that we can carry back into the office with us and not necessarily just fall back into the status quo from 2 months ago.
That's a very good point that you make, that the access to a person's attention is different when you're working from home. So, you know, my coworkers having access to me, there's a lot more boundaries that they have to get through in order to reach me than, you know, being in the office and just, you know, looking over to the next, you know, desk. So I see your point there. So I guess let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So this is my calendar. Now I've removed, so our team, we share calendars. So I have removed Dion and Rebecca's calendar. I've also removed my husband's calendar from this. So that I have a better idea of what my day would look like. Usually my calendar is a lot more colorful than this. So I've removed all of that. And here is my to-do list. So like I said, this is a very small morsel of what I have to get done in a day. So I have to start planning for our next webinar, for instance. And so some of the tasks that I have is to recruit a speaker. So I have to send an email. I have to gather, a summary, a bio, and headshot from the speaker. I have to create an event in our event calendar. I have to write a summary of the description, populate the event, create a Zoom event. Then I have to email the event details to Rebecca because I work on a team and we do things, in our little sandboxes. So then I hand it over to Rebecca for promotion. So I have to make sure that I have all of my links and descriptions set up and ready to hand off to her. And then I have to promote the event. All of our team members, we all promote the same events because we all have our own individual networks. So we're all promoting the same event. So again, that's just one task that I have to accomplish. Then I have my operations side. I have accounts payables that I have to take care of. We are planning a virtual conference in September, and so I still have to manage a lot of those tasks as well. And then I've got my personal. So I still have to do laundry, buy milk, schedule dental visits for my kids, do a hair appointment since my hairdresser is now available, sign up one of my kids for karate, and RSVP to a birthday party, which the RSVP will be no at this point. We're still social distancing.
Yeah. So this is a typical list, okay? And actually debugging, if you will, the traditional to-do list is really another whole topic, but it is something that we cover. Of interest here is, and correct me if I'm wrong, this may or may not be, I think this is probably not things that you can't accomplish all of these things today. There's time constraints around how much you can do in a day, but also there seem to be what I call predecessor and successor events in the sense that something has to be done before the next step can be taken. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to focus with this task list up. Now, Christina, I hate to give you a pop quiz at this stage. Can you have both the list and the calendar up at the same time where we can see them?
Let me see what I can do. No, I can't.
Okay, so we'll take it.
Okay.
But you'll be able to see the list on your computer somewhere and keep us on track with what this list looks like. Okay.
Yes.
So the first question that we always ask, and this is part of the attention compass, and it begins with the daily review process. So the daily review process is to get out your task list, which we've prepared in very specific ways, and get out your calendar and say, okay, are these two things going to work together, right? So with your list of, and you went through it pretty quick, but there were probably 30 distinct things on your list?
About that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And so you've got these 4 meetings already set up. So 3 hours of your day is already committed at least. Is there something further down? We can see up to 1. Okay, good.
Yep.
So the very first step is to take a look at your calendar and to take a look at your task list and see if these things work together. And you want to do that very early in the day because in my experience, people are very nice when you can cancel something sufficiently far in advance. And people get increasingly less nice the closer you get to the start time of what it is you're trying to cancel, right? And then if you're 5 minutes after the start time, then most people, including me, are quite irritable about the fact that this meeting's not going to happen. So all that to say, we want to, early in the day, we want to take a look at our task list. We want to take a look at our calendar and say, okay, do these two things work together?
Okay.
And as we're doing that, we want to not only just say, no, I can't do this task today, but we also want to have a sense of when we think we can do it. Now, there's very specific ways to do that we won't get into. Now, I'll back up just a little bit, and I'll say that the idea for this webinar was based on 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, when Dion had guests that started talking about time boxing and how you do that. And that really is the focus of what we're going to do today. So when we look at time boxing, early in the day, we want to take a look at our schedule, and we see that we have areas that we can reclaim from our calendar. Christina, your organization shares calendars, right?
Yes.
So anybody in your organization can see what your availability might be, and they'll jump in there with a meeting or a conversation or something, and you either accept or decline the meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's typical of most folks. Well, what I coach as a best practice is to go ahead and reserve the time that you think you're going to need to get your work done.
Okay.
Because otherwise you're at the mercy of other people's view of your calendar. And I'll confess that when I log on to somebody else's calendar and look for an open spot and find one, my assumption is that unless I give them a meeting during that time, then they're just going to sit there being bored. So
Okay.
we all know that's not true for ourselves, right? But we tend to lose that perspective a little bit when we're looking at somebody else's calendar. So one of the things I coach to do is to go ahead and reserve time on your calendar. We call this time blocking.
Okay.
So you're going to take and make an appointment for yourself from 9:30 to 10:30.
All right.
I have a client who shares calendars with the rest of his organization, and he has a fictitious company that he makes meetings with because they can see what's on his calendar, and he doesn't want to say me time and let everybody see that because that's like chum in the water for somebody trying to schedule a meeting, right?
All right. Task.
Any title will do for our purposes here. Yeah, task list. That's great because that brings us to our next point. So those of you that might be, so good, we got it in there, and you did a great job of leaving a little bit of time between the meeting you just scheduled and the next meeting. I see a lot of people make the mistake of slamming those meetings back to back. Okay.
Yes. So one of the things that I found, one of my tricks that I found in Google is that I can create, in my settings, I can put in a buffer. So I always put in a buffer of 5 minutes. I know other people put half an hour buffers in between meetings so that they can have a lot more time to prepare. So I haven't quite got there yet, but I might have to adopt that.
No, but that's a great idea. And using those tools in those ways really helps because you don't even have to think about it.
Yes.
Right? It just automatically says, no, I'm not going to bump up against this next meeting. And we've all had days when we've had back-to-back meetings. And invariably what happens is one of the first 2 or 3 meetings will run 5 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with somebody that you can't walk out of the room on. Right?
Yes.
And so then you're faced with showing up late to the next meeting, which automatically tends to push it longer, right? Forget the idea of getting a fresh cup of coffee or whatever it takes to get you moving. Forget the idea of actually doing some mental preparation to switch context to that next meeting. You're hopping from room to room to room, okay? And a free tip for everybody is you'll see this if you have late afternoon doctor or dentist appointments, okay? The later you schedule that appointment in the day, the more likely it is that you're going to sit there and wait on the doctor, right? So I always try to get the first appointment in the day because at least I know they'll see me on a reasonable approximation of the time that we requested. So great job so far. So, and the other thing that you did that's really good is you did not try to over-specify your time block. And what I mean by over-specifying, those of us that go back 20 years to daytimers, we were instructed to fill in our paper calendars in 15-minute increments with how long a task would take to do. And we were instructed to put the name of the task into our calendar. In my coaching experience, that's too fragile. It's too tightly packed. And if you don't wind up getting to a task that you've got scheduled at a particular time, then you've got the overhead of having to reschedule it and create a new appointment for it. So what we do when we time block, we use a generic name so that we don't get caught in the trap of, well, this 15 minutes and I'm already 5 minutes late because my meeting ran long is to do blah, and right, and not get to the stuff that you want to get to and then have the overhead of having to reschedule that. So take another time block. Do they not allow you to go to lunch in your organization? Dion?
Um, so I am out of compliance. I actually, on a good day, I actually don't eat much. I'm always so busy I forget to eat.
Okay.
I haven't had breakfast yet today.
Oh my.
I'm just hopping in to say that is not a company policy.
No, it's
I
not.
want her to eat. I am only despotic to myself. That
There
is
you go.
all.
Great.
Yes.
So we'll take it as it is, and we'll say that there's another work block available from, what would you say, Christina, 11:15 to 12:30, something like that?
Yes, I've got 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock
Right.
available.
So again, even with our own time blocks, we want to reserve time between that and the previous meeting and build a buffer in there.
Yes.
Okay. So much like a meeting, by the time your work block comes around, okay, you want to have done all of the tasks. You want your coffee cup to be refilled. You want, right, so that when the time comes, you can actually move directly into the task and not have the overhead of, oh, well, the first part of my work block is to refill my coffee cup.
Yes.
Okay. So let's put a buffer in, as you were doing before, and let's start this work block at about 11:15 and run it to about 12:45.
Okay.
I've had meetings with Donnie, and assuming that that's Donnie that I know, then you're going to need some prep time for that meeting.
Yes.
So you can build that in.
Did you say 11?
Thanks, Donnie.
All right.
The meetings are so full of information exchange that you really have to be on top of your game by the time you get there.
All right.
Okay, so we wanted to go ahead and make that fill up that available time. So it needs to end at 12:45 or whatever that looks like.
Right. Oh, goodness. Technical difficulties.
Oh, you're fine.
All right. So I have my buffer. So it'll end
go.
at 12:35.
All right, great. So now what you're seeing is you're beginning to see a fuller calendar, but let's recognize that some of the fullness of this calendar is time you've reserved to work on your own stuff. There's no need to panic if you've done your calendar this way, right? Because that's time that you can use. So and then there's another work block at maybe 2:30 to whenever you quit your day, but I think we've made the point, and so
yes.
No need necessarily. You go ahead and put something in there. Now, this does something really important but subtle when people ask you for meeting time. So in addition to having people who have direct access to your calendar and can choose their time, and you either accept or reject, there are also people that call you on the phone or send email, however that works, and say, hey, are you available at noon today? And I think all of us have built the habit of checking our calendars before we answer that email. And on my calendar, when I see blank space, what my brain says is, sure, Larry, you're available. And I want to hurry up and respond to this email. And it's like, sure, okay, whatever. Well, if I haven't already blocked out that time, then it's real easy for me to say yes. Where if I've blocked out that time, then at least there's a signal for me to think, right? Oh, wow, my task list. And then I go, well, what's on my task list? And is it more important than this meeting that's being suggested to me? Or more important, probably not right, maybe more urgent. And that's just another psychological thing that we can do to help ourselves manage our time very well. And so most of the time when you get an email saying, hey, can we meet at noon today? If I send that email, normally I've just picked a time that I think is convenient for me. It's not something that, well, it's got to be done at 12 today. And if you say, hey, how about, later this afternoon or tomorrow even, I'm perfectly happy with that in most circumstances. But I've got to trick myself when I'm looking at my calendar and receiving emails like that to say, hey, no, this is time I've reserved to do important work. And so that makes a big difference, even though it's a small psychological thing. Does that make sense?
It does. And so after the last time you and I spoke, when we were walking through this, you inspired me to adopt something else. And so if you look the week after, I have built in office hours. And so during my office hours, I've got time slots where I am making myself available for meetings and readjusting my calendar so that I only do meetings maybe 2 days a week rather than, outside of my team. So I'll have these office hour meetings where anybody who wants to request a meeting with me, they can look and pick a time during those times. And then I will reserve the other days for our time blocking.
And that's a great idea. And different people have different levels of control over this, but it's always a good idea to give this a shot.
Yes.
So where I usually wind up coaching this is if somebody is management and they have a bunch of direct reports. Mm-hmm. Okay, so direct reports are really interruption fodder because any of us that have managed other people are used to, hey boss, you got a second? It's like, yeah, I guess so. You've already interrupted me, so let's talk about whatever you've got. So with your direct reports, if you institute office hours, then what you're saying is, I guarantee to be available during this time period. So if something comes up or something you need to interrupt me on, I guarantee that I'll be interruptible during this time period. The trade-off is over time, you guarantee that you won't interrupt me under other times. Right?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So think back to your university time. All professors are pretty much required to hold some office hours. Yes. And that's when they say, yes, I'll be here, I'll be available. Now, another trick about office hours is to make sure that you're doing something during that time, during your office hours, that is in fact interruptible.
Yes.
Right? So you get to this office hours and you go, hey, I've got time to, call my boss and ask for a raise, right? You don't want to be doing that. Right.
So would that be the appropriate time for me to say, schedule the dental visits?
Maybe. A great time for little short tasks, right? Ideally, you would be doing something that's completely interruptible, because if you get on with it, and I won't out my dentist, but several of my medical professionals, I get on and want to schedule an appointment and they put me on hold.
True.
Right?
Okay.
And then somebody comes and visits during office hours and I have to say, hang on. Okay. And I'm on hold, and then they're going to get their phone out. And, next thing you know, we've, wasted 10 or 15 minutes. So this is a good time for reading. It's a good time for catching up on email processing, talking about office hours. Right.
Okay.
And when I say processing, I mean just that, processing. Okay. Don't get into a 30-minute explanation to the CEO of, because then that's going to be a challenge for people. But the idea of office hours is a great one. And you can help people learn to use that for you. So now let's go back to our day that we're planning, because we really haven't addressed your task list yet.
Nope.
Okay. So let's pretend that it's, 8 a.m. We've blocked our time out. So we know we're going to have some working time to be able to attack this list. So what we're going to do is start up with Breakfast Club. We're going to do that, and then we're going to jump to the daily Scrum meeting, and we're going to deal with that. And then at 9:30, we're going to see, okay, well, the next thing on my calendar is my task list. That's when we go to the task list, and we are agile, and we're flexible, and we say, okay, of this task list, now what are the most urgent things to take care of? So we're not prioritizing the task list heavily in advance. We're not saying, oh, this is number one, it's got to be done first. Well, you have a sense of what needs to be done first. That also can change during the day.
Okay.
So when we get to our work block, we look at our list and we go, okay, I've actually got 45 minutes. What's urgent? What can be done in 45 minutes? And then we select our task from our task list and begin to work on it without a lot of overhead of, well, is that really the priority? So we go in and we say, okay, well, I've got this block, I can get this done.
Okay, let's make the assumption that my speaker for our next webinar has already confirmed and has already sent me their bio and headshots. So then, realistically, in 45 minutes, I can do, set up these tasks, which is create an event calendar, write a summary and description, populate a page event, create the Zoom events, and then email those things to my coworker. So I'm going to cut those. And should I just plop those into my calendar?
Yeah, you certainly can do that.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the checkbox functionality that some apps have. What are you using here? Is this a Word doc or
this is
Google version?
Google.
Yeah. So there might be, I use Evernote. So
okay.
shout out to Evernote. Another good option for this is Microsoft's OneNote, but it really doesn't need to worry us too much. So what I would do is I would say, okay, these are the things that I want to work on, and I know that. You could paste it in or not.
Okay.
And then in your world, what I would do is at the end of the time block, I would use the strike through function to let me know that those tasks are completed. And again, we want low overhead. We want low, what's the word I'm looking for? We want to pack it lightly because we are big in overpromising to ourselves. Yes. Oh, I can get all this done in 45 minutes. Really? Okay. And if you go ahead and copy and paste it and suck it out of your document and put it into the calendar event, then if you don't get to all of it, then you're just going to have to undo some parts of that.
Okay.
So what I do is I consult the task list and I say, okay, here's what I think I can get done. Here's what I'm going to work on. And then at the end of that time block, I'm going to go back to my list and I'm going to check box or strike through or whatever's necessary, highlighting to tell myself that that part of the list is complete. So does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yes.
So that way the task list is a living document, right? There are very precise, and maybe this is a topic for another conversation, very precise ways to manage a task list. Most of us don't do tasks lists terribly well. It's more of a brain dump, and we don't consider the context normally when we make a task list. But we can talk about that another time. Your task list, by the way, is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we do have a couple of questions from the audience that I think are relevant to what we're doing. Haley Kendrick asks, would you recommend scheduling your day each morning, or do you go ahead of time for to do so for the week? So what do you do it every day, or should you do one or the other, or both?
I do it daily. I don't worry about the week at large because beyond today, the predictability of my world is close to zero. Lots of bad things happen overnight. I don't know why they happen overnight when everybody's supposed to be asleep, but that's when they happen. Mm-hmm. So my practice is to look at this every day. Now, if there's a deadline that you have to meet, this paper has to be turned in by, or this article has to be turned in by 3:00 on Friday. Yes. And you might want to note that in your calendar and put in a specific work block just to finalize that work.
Okay.
But I do daily. And then weekly, you want to have a general sense of what your week looks like. So Attention Compass also teaches a weekly review process where you actually look at next week's calendar versus your best idea of what next week's to-do list looks like. And again, you try to make these things work together.
Okay.
But at least if you're starting this process, I would at least start with daily and see if that works for you, because that's the most flexibility.
Okay. Now, Haley asks a great question, because this is something I struggle with too. And how do you ensure your larger, longer-term projects don't keep getting boxed out of the smaller tasks? I have this problem too, because it's so much more satisfying having, more check boxes, on your task list, but there are definitely tasks that require a lot more energy than that would require.
Yeah. That's a great question and a really difficult topic, and it's something that we consider in the broader Attention Compass course. Okay. The most important things in your world are probably not urgent. So relationships, okay, working out, okay. It's never the case that if you're not at the gym in 15 minutes, you're going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
That's never true. But being at the gym on a regular basis is very important to us. It's just not urgent. And so we do let the urgent push out the important. And for those of you that haven't studied this topic, I recommend the first part of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he does a really good job of detangling urgency and importance. But for our purposes today, you can see, hey, I've got an hour, right, at 11:15 that I can use towards longer term projects, a whole hour, okay? The other thing about the important but not urgent is that you probably can't make much progress 5 minutes at a time, right? And so you've got these 5-minute blocks, which if you don't manage your calendar is all you wind up with, the leftovers. And you say, what can I do in 5 minutes? Well, I can process 2 emails. And this is how we get into this trap of, hey, my email is in great shape, but my relationships and my health and the maintenance stuff I need to be doing are all in terrible shape. So that's a really good question and really is a broader topic in the Attention Compass discussion.
Thank you. Let's see. Are we going to get some insight into doing things that aren't so concrete? Like in the next 2 days, I need to get a feature into testing.
Yeah, again, a great question and one that is a broader topic.
Thank you, Kristen.
When I coach people, we think through those sorts of things. Okay, so it has to do with how do you build your task list. And this notion of it's got to be done sometime in the next 2 days is something that we could handle. For now, what I would say is just make sure that it's on your task list, okay? And make sure that the task has an actionable next step. So if your task is fix Sigao's marketing plan, okay, then that's something, my brain looks at that task and goes, oh my gosh, it's too big. And so then my brain runs and hides, and I wind up processing email again. Okay, so getting those actual actionable steps onto your task list and use some highlighting, in this case, use some highlighting or something to tell you that that's that important. Maybe put the due date in the task, due by. And then if you're processing that task list every day, then you'll see that happening, okay? We didn't get to where we are, the audience of this podcast, we didn't get to where we are because we're lazy or because we don't know when it's time to work. It's just recognizing that the clock's ticking and seeing that in front of your face every day between now and the delivery date that really helps.
Well, great. So you mentioned Evernote. Are there other tools that you've seen that are effective in helping with task management?
There are a couple of unique features to Evernote that we've utilized in the Attention Compass that really make a difference. One thing is Evernote handles reminders in a specific way that we've captured. But you can really use lots of different tools, and I have not explored this whole space. Those of you that have looked into productivity, you could spend 40 hours a week just keeping up with the new stuff and what's changing and what the recommendations are. So my view is Evernote. My fallback would be OneNote, and then the fallback from that is just text. Have a note, have it where you can see it consistently. Maybe you have an appointment every day at 7:45 with your task list attached to that. That makes it a little hard to deal with because you lose functionality when you attach stuff to a calendar event. Mm-hmm. But really my go-to tool, and it's been this way for 10 years, is Evernote. I probably spend, of a nominal 8-hour workday, I probably spend 6.5 hours looking at a computer, and fully 80% of that I'm actually looking at Evernote.
Okay. Well, I actually don't keep my task list on just a Google Doc anymore. I use Asana. Mm-hmm. We've just recently adopted using Asana, but before that we used Rike. And I still also will just keep like a little sticky note with, the same tasks, but on the sticky note because it's a tactile reminder for me to get what I need done. How about the peanut gallery? What are some tools that are great for you to help you stay on task?
And while they're giving suggestions, I will say that there's a couple of pretty important features that a system needs to have, right? One is, and this is again a whole nother topic that we talk about in the coaching, is most filing systems force you into hierarchical filing, which everything has to be about one and only one thing. And it's complicated, and I'll get there. But you can set up Evernote in such a way that things appear to be in more than one location at the same time.
Yeah.
So if I was looking at a tool, I would look for a tagging system in addition to some sort of a filing system, because normally multiple tags can be applied to the same item.
Let's see. I'm a GTD guy personally, and I use Toast. What is GTD?
GTD is getting things done.
Oh, okay.
That's David Allen's book. Yeah. From the 2000-ish.
Okay.
And he's great, but he's very focused on paper. Okay. And so things has incorporated some GTD work. Listen, David Allen's stuff really changed the way I approach my own personal productivity. But at the end of the day, if it's paper, then it has a physical existence, and I can only deal with it in physical ways versus electronic stuff. So like this piece of paper can only be in one file at one time. There's no way for it to be in multiple locations at the same time. So you're limited in how you can file it and thus how you can find it.
Okay, so getting things done. I'll have to write this down because I like paper. But because we live in 2020, I've adopted using computer things to help me with my old-fashioned things. But this sounds like a great way for me to do both.
Well, and I love paper. There's no mechanism on the planet like paper for recording notes in the moment. You can draw diagrams, you can underline things, and if I'm on a computer, I got to type, and then I got a mouse and things. So the key thing about paper is to use it, but to use it well.
Yes.
So what you'll see me do is I'll take paper notes during the meeting, but as I walk out of the meeting, I'll take a picture of those notes and leave the paper in the trash can. Because how many times do you go back and edit your notes, honestly, on paper? Right. You take meeting notes, on a page in your planner. And how many times do you actually go back and, edit those notes? I mean, you read them a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So the picture is as easily manageable as is the paper, the piece of paper.
Yes. Well, great. Let's see. So we've got some great suggestions. There's also the bullet journal.
Bullet journal I'm familiar with. So that's a specific way of marking tasks, as I recall, in terms of urgency and whether or not they're done, and a way to specifically move things around on paper.
Let's see. Haley also uses Asana, a calendar, and paper planner. Let's see. Good Busy. Rebecca uses the Good Busy Planner, which she has turned me on to. I use that as well. Love my Good Busy Planner.
I'll look that one up.
Let's see. Kristen Hammock says Notion. I'm not familiar with Notion. See, I'm such a junkie for learning all these productivity things.
Well, and I will caution, right? It's one of these areas where you can really get lost in the research.
Yes.
And you can really use a lot of time trying a system and, it's better in this ways and it's not as good as those ways. Is there some way I can integrate them? and those kinds of ideas. So at some level, be wise in experimenting and keeping up with the innovation versus actually using the tool for what it's for, right?
Yes.
Which is getting your stuff done.
Yes. And that's something else that, like Rebecca and I have talked about this quite often. We have, every time we hear about these new tools, we'll test them out. And so what we end up doing is losing our productivity because we're learning how to use a new tool, rather than using the tools that we already have and learning to use them more efficiently. Like we keep jumping from tool to tool. And so, and
I get that a lot in my coaching. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, I'm already using insert your tool name here. And I'm a big Evernote proponent. Yeah. And what I tell people is, look, I can get you where you need to be in 10 to 12 weeks of 1 hour a week meetings. Mm-hmm. And you'll learn the principles of both the workflows and the systems. And then you'll be able to say, okay, I know what's important to look for in a system. Mm-hmm. So then I can, once I understand it, right? It's like I used to play golf, right? And I'd go to the golf store and I'd look at clubs all day long when what I should have been doing was being on the golf course, right? The tool only makes, sometimes it's the arrow, but usually it's the archer.
Yes.
Right? So that's what I encourage people to do is let me teach you the way I know how to do it and show you what's available in this tool set, and then you'll know what to look for in other tool sets.
Well, great. Are there any other suggestions for my calendar that we need to cover?
I think you're in really good shape. One of the things that we could talk about is the notion of time boxing. Okay. So when you get to 1:15, you've got to recognize that you've got an hour to accomplish something. Okay. At the end of that hour, you need to deliver something to the rest of the world.
Okay.
It may not be perfect. You've got to come to grips with that. But if I'm a boss, I'd much rather have a good first half of a report or second half, depending on your preference, because then I can begin to take action. Where if I have to wait for the 100% report, then I'm twiddling my thumbs. Does that make sense?
That's very Scrum methodology, isn't it?
Deliver something.
Yes.
And then people can take action. They can either move their stuff along, which you're an input to.
Yes.
Or you can, they can tell you that, no, this is not at all what I wanted. And then you can start building the right thing for them. And it is very much a Scrum idea. The attention compass and backlog management have many ideas in common. Mm-hmm. How do you prioritize in the backlog? How do we get to the important but not urgent, say, architectural aspects of a development project? So all these things are very important, but do take short bites, get lots of feedback, and when it's time to deliver the product, deliver it. And let other people tell you, hey, I need more of this or more of that, or at least I can make some progress.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much, Larry. Again, always very insightful. And, again, I'm still learning, as all of us are, how to take care of, our time management. If there's any other questions in the...
Yeah, and just let me say while we're developing questions, I really appreciate what you guys are doing both through this topic. I really miss the monthly lunch and interacting with the rest of the group. And this is a great way to continue that. If anything, maybe it's a little bit more value because we're doing it weekly. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that this is the first time dipping into this webinar, I highly recommend that you do it, again next week, and you'll see tremendous value over time that the TechBirmingham folks are producing for our community. So just thanks to you all for the huge amount of effort and time it takes to put this together for us.
Well, we appreciate the feedback and the support. That was our vision going forward. Hey, Matt, can you bring Dion and Rebecca back on for us. So, I mean, Dion will tell you that, this has been, we've tried to make sure that we are listening to our members and what their needs are and providing content to help with, bridging some of those gaps. So thank you, Larry. I appreciate the time that you've put into it. Thank you for coaching me. I got a free coaching session out of this. But you could also contact Larry. He's available to do coaching sessions and more in-depth sessions. And so you can contact him for more information. We'll send out his contact information in our follow-up emails. And that's it for me. Dion, take it away, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christina. Again, Larry, thanks for the kind words. Really appreciate that, but also just appreciate you taking your time out to help us, as I like to say, level up, right? Not just the tools, but the strategies, the processes. How do we go about making sure we are making the most effective use of our time? So this is something I'm totally interested in. I was nerding out seeing GTD and just all of the stuff going by. I would love to unpack a lot more of that, but maybe for another session. Maybe this is a start of the Larry and TechBirmingham course. I don't know. We'll figure all of that out. But again, as always, thanks everybody for taking a moment to join us. If you had to hop off early, or if you know somebody that would appreciate this content, feel free to send them toward our YouTube page, youtube.com/TechBirmingham. We usually get those up in about a day, 2 days, maybe even earlier now that we have some good time management skills and tips at our disposal. But reach out to us, make sure you're engaged, let us know what you're thinking. If there's anything regarding this topic that you would like to dive into more, feel free to toss it our way. And until then, have a great day and a great week ahead. Thanks again.
Thank you.